Okay, welcome everyone to this edition of the Green Reviews Working Group on the 14th of August. That I'll be hosting today, and yeah, just the usual kind of reminders. So this meeting comes under the CNCF Code of Conduct, which essentially means that we should be excellent to each other. And also this meeting will be recorded and gets uploaded to YouTube. So if you want to keep your camera off, that's totally fine. And so yeah, let me just share the meeting notes. Yes, I just put those in the chat. Yeah, I'll just share as well. Okay, so yeah, if you're able to just add yourselves as attendees, great. And then yeah, for today on the agenda, we're just going to talk about proposal 2, which was merged last week. We're going to work on talk about proposal 3 that Chris is working on. But just for a start, I'm going to take a step back and look at the overall tracking issue we have. So hopefully that's followed across. Yeah, to the overall kind of work package we're working on. So this is the next iteration of the pipeline we've been working on that follows on the first iteration we released at KubeCon in Paris earlier in the year. And so we have these 4 proposals. The first one is the deploy step, which is deploying, in this case, Falco, deploying that into our cluster and then cleaning up at the end. The run step is how we run the benchmark tests against Falco in this case. So we'll talk about that in more detail. This is followed by the report stage, where we capture the metrics. So for example, the SCI score, the energy measurements, and then store those metrics. And then the fourth proposal is the benchmarking investigation that we want to go through. And something that we've been talking about is we want to create a new milestone for these first 3 proposals for KubeCon NA, which is mid-November. And so thinking there is to get kind of ideally to get the next iteration of the pipeline ready in time for KubeCon NA, and then we have kind of the opportunity to present it there, get more people interested in the project there. So with it being mid-November as well, we have kind of some time as well to prepare for that. But just having the deadline is also can be helpful as well, so we keep making progress. And so yeah, we'll just quickly touch on the second proposal, which was merged last week. So yeah, hopefully this is following through on the screen sharing, but this is the proposal we have merged for running the benchmarks. What I'll just do is go to the diagram that we have here, because that kind of gives a good state of where we are and then also where we kind of want to add things. So we have our cron workflow, which at the moment runs once a day and starts the pipeline. And so we have 3 configurations of Falco that we test. And then we go into the workflow itself where we deploy Falco. The new steps for proposal 2 are in here, where we'll have a new GitHub Actions workflow for the benchmarks. And then we have 3 manifests that have been prepared by the Falco team that we deploy. And it's also when we're adding the record step proposal 3, this would then come after running the workflow. So we would then capture the metrics, and then at the end of the process, we delete the resources ready for the next pipeline run. So that's kind of the overview of where we are there. And then we just have the tracking issue. Yeah, actually, I should just show, for example. So this is the repo that the Falco team have prepared with the 3 load generators that we're working for. And then we have these manifests here. So the next stage in the implementation is applying these manifests during the pipeline run. And then at the end of the pipeline, we'll delete the benchmarks, and then we'll delete the project itself, to delete the Falco resources as well. And so yeah, let me just find the next issue on here. Yes, so Nikki started creating the implementation issues here. And so we have the first issue, which is we want to be able to add benchmarks to the pipeline. And so what we have is we have this project.json file. And this has the tool that we're measuring. So, Falco is the first tool we're working for. These are the 3 configurations. And what we'll do is we'll add a benchmark path here. And this benchmark path will run the Falco benchmarks. And in the future, it could run other benchmarks as well. And so that's how we'll kind of add this to the pipeline. And then the second step, yeah, let me just find the issue for that. Yes, yeah, and then so the second step itself is actually preparing the new workflow. And we just have some communication work there to talk with the Falco team to give them kind of an update of where we are. And then we can create the second issue and start working on that. And then once we have these parts working, then we'll do some work on reproducibility to make sure everything's working correctly. Yes, yeah, but are there any questions on the second proposal?
I had a quick question. What resources are these being run on? Is this something that's run on a desktop, or is it run on a dedicated set of hardware?
Yeah, thanks, Misha. It's a great question. So we're actually running on Equinix Metal Cluster. And so we have the community lab, the CNCF community lab, and so Equinix donates some machines there, which is great, and is really great for a use case. So what we have is we have an Equinix cluster, and then on the Equinix cluster we've got Kepler deployed, and because it's bare metal, the machines have the RAPL power measurement metrics, so we can then capture Kepler kind of energy measurements rather than using the estimation mode that's used in the cloud. So yeah, so we have kind of a small Equinix cluster, and so that's deployed via Tofu. So we have this Tofu script in here, which is how that's deployed.
Mm-hmm. And then a related question is, as the developers are working on this, are they required to have access to that cluster, or do they typically do development on their personal machines?
Yes. So we're following kind of a GitOps workflow as much as we can. So any changes to Tofu, for example, for the configuration of the code, are rolled out through a CI/CD. But what we do have is we have some read-only config. So in the doc section here, I think we've got in infrastructure. Yeah, in cluster access. I can put these in the chat as well with the docs that we have.
Thank you.
But yes, so we have a read-only kube config that people can get access to get the cluster, and then if they need kind of write access as well, then we can work with them on that.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, that's just the docs for that. And so that's ideally we do everything through GitOps, but obviously there's situations where you need to kind of test work or see what the state of the cluster is. And so we have this read-only kube config, and then we have another one that we use for the pipeline as well to have kind of restricted permissions. So that kube config can create kind of flux resources, but has a more kind of restricted set of permissions.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and what we find that by using the kind of Equinix cluster, it means we've got RAPL access, and we've also got there's an IPMI power monitor as well that Kepler can use to measure the idle power. So that's been quite useful for the actual measurements.
It'll be interesting to see with respect to the report how much of the system specs are part of the report, because it seems like that would be important to have, because I would assume on different hardware, different kinds of systems, you'd have different power, consumption and so forth. So knowing from a repeatability standpoint, knowing what systems it's been run on will give you some sense of like what the actual consumption looks like.
Yes. So we try and run the tests on the same node size to have that reproducibility. There are some challenges there for things like, I think, the version of Kepler might affect how the measurements are recorded. We have talked in the past about recording metadata so that we know kind of what version of Kubernetes we were testing, what version of Kepler, to add with that, because reproducibility is definitely something we want to aim for. But it's just for as we do upgrades, that might change how things are measured. And so what we also try and do is we're kind of focusing on the energy measurements that we measure with Kepler, so teams can optimize to reduce their footprint, but we also cover the embodied carbon as well. And the downside of this approach of using bare metal is obviously the machines are quite powerful, and so the embodied carbon is higher, and that's kind of a trade-off. We get this higher embodied carbon, but the benefit is we get more accurate measurements because we're using RAPL.
Yeah, the measurement part makes a lot of sense for using bare metal. All right, thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, so just wrapping up in terms of proposal 2, we've created the first implementation issue. We've got a second one to create, and then we can kind of start working on that. And I think also this is a good point then to hand over to the proposal 3, which is the next proposal we want to write to kind of complete the proposal process for this first milestone. So Chris, what topics were you wanting to discuss on proposal 3?
So there's a little bit of dual self-interest for me because I'm also working on this book where I need to do a whole bunch of evaluation of infrastructure and back-end programming languages anyway. So I kind of was using this also as a reason for me to have something, a setup to test some of that stuff and benchmark some of that stuff. Antonio helped me get a lot of sort of bits of the the tooling setup, whatever you want to call it, working locally to begin with, using Docker Desktop on an Apple Silicon Mac, which seems like the worst possible combination, but we actually got it working meaningfully with some extra things, which is also an issue I need to raise with Kepler. We discovered something seemed to be missing, and as soon as we installed it, everything came to life. My next intention, because it's hard for me to keep pushing things to cloud services I have no access to and sort of learn what I'm doing. I have a mini PC that Ross recommended to me set up at home. That's my next step, is to move on to something more generic than an Apple laptop. And it's an Intel Ubuntu machine. So that's kind of my next intention, is to basically push what I have now set up onto that. And then it's probably then easier to move it to metal at some point. But my main sort of question is not really around that side of things. That's kind of a me problem. It's more, so we were looking at I think Antonio suggested looking at we were looking mostly at the container joules total metric. But it also now shows up in Kepler anyway. And then there was a comment in this, if you scroll down a bit on this this issue, there's a comment I think from you, yeah, when you mention the 3 SRE metrics, CPU and memory requests, both focusing in this comment. We're also looking at that, like it's relatively easy to get those, but I think the main sort of bit where we got a little bit, and he wasn't really sure either, was kind of what do we like we can get those things relatively easily, but what do we do with them? And what do they show? Why do we what do we want to report, I suppose? And those metrics especially, we couldn't really understand they're useful and we could report them, but why were they useful to this task? So that was kind of it. Like now I kind of have everything working and I sort of understand it a bit more and I know how to get reports, but I'm not really sure what we're trying to report.
Yes.
That was kind of where we got to. Yeah.
Yes. Well, taking a step back on the Apple Silicon, I'm very interested to see how that went as well, because I've tried to do that as well and I couldn't get that working. So
Yeah.
if you're able to talk to the Kepler team now, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I ended up getting the home lab, the one I suggested,
Yeah.
was the kind of workaround for this issue.
Yeah.
but getting back to this, so I can do a bit of the kind of the background on this.
Yeah.
So the feedback we got from the Falco team was, within the working group, we definitely have a focus around the energy measurement, and that's kind of our primary focus. But what their feedback was it's quite a new metric. It's not as common as some of the more familiar kind of SRE type metrics. And their feedback was for the Falco team to be able to action those metrics. They would also like to have what we kind of describe as SRE type metrics.
Okay.
To see, so if the energy usage has increased, and also so the CPU has increased, then we can think, well, maybe
Right.
there's more kind of CPU
Yeah.
led.
Yeah.
But it's sort of the next stage. So the energy measurements kind of tells us we need to take action, and these
Yeah.
are the additional metrics are to kind of help target the action of where
Okay.
to optimize.
So, I mean, he said, do we just like dump it to a text file, or what
Hmm.
what constitutes a report, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, and so I think with this proposal, there's at least two or maybe three areas where it touches. So there's just the recording of the measurements that we'll need to figure into the pipeline, at some stage. But then there's also which metrics we record and where we store them. And I think that's where we were talking about having kind of persistent storage.
Okay.
Yeah, this long-term storage section.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and this, I think there's different ways of doing this. For the first version of the pipeline, we're using Prometheus. We have a Grafana
Okay. Yeah.
dashboard, but those Prometheus metrics are changing over time, so we would
Yeah.
lose them over time.
Yeah.
It looked like I think it's push gateway. There was a component within Prometheus that looked interesting to us because I think by using push gateway, those metrics don't expire.
Okay.
So that might be useful for this task, but
Yeah.
also actually, I mean, maybe even just CSV might be better, just in terms of
Yeah.
having a long-term storage.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
and that could have other benefits. For example, we've got the cluster. We can back up metrics and Prometheus on the cluster, but it
yeah.
might also be useful to have metrics outside of the cluster that we would then
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
forwards.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is what the company I worked for had a similar kind of concept. Um, and so are we looking, so those three SRE metrics, and is that container joules total, if that's it, I can find it quite easily.
Mm.
Are those the four things we want to be putting into something, whatever it be, happen to be, or is there more than that?
Yes, yeah, I think that those are the four kind of metrics, and we'll need to
Okay.
query Prometheus and query those. I think those
Yep.
are definitely the four to start with.
Okay.
And maybe we need more S3 metrics later, but we thought
Yep.
the metrics they requested, I think
Okay.
there's one around CPU
Yeah.
and two around memory,
Yep.
but we could
Yep.
then
Yep.
also design a way if we need to add like a fourth or a fifth, we could do.
Yep.
But I think
Yep.
starting with these four is a good starting point.
Okay. Okay. And then the actual nature of the proposal is more of a um, leveraging the current pipeline, blah 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 blah.
Mm.
We'll run these. They have those three jobs: the Redis one, the stress NG, and there's another one which I can't quite remember. But I did try them all.
Yeah.
Um, Output these metrics for, I don't know, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. Like I'm not sure exactly what's meaningful. And that's basically it. That's the proposal in as many words.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I think with the time period, I think for the current process, we're using kind of 15 minutes. So I think we
50
could
minutes.
use
Okay.
15 minutes, like as a
Yeah.
starting point.
Yeah.
So that will be it really. We would deploy the three benchmarks we have, we would wait
Yeah.
15 minutes,
Yeah.
and then we have the record step to query
Yeah.
Prometheus, get the metrics,
Okay.
save them somewhere, and then we have the metrics being captured.
Okay.
We would then need to see, how we display that. We
Yeah.
have the current dashboard, but depending what we
Yeah.
use for storage, you might need to do something else there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would focus the proposal, on capturing those four
Yeah.
metrics,
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
persistent storage of them,
Yeah.
and then we can always iterate on the proposal,
Yeah.
further. But I think that's a good
Yeah.
starting point.
Okay. Cool. That was the main thing. Yeah. I think we were not entirely sure how those SRE things fit in with everything. But that makes sense now. I mean, that's easy enough. Okay, I will put together that proposal probably in the next week then. And I also have kind of written down and summarized how I got things working, mostly for my own benefit. But I will share with you how I got it working. I mean, of course, there's getting it working and there is it working meaningfully. I have no idea. It looks meaningful.
Yes, yeah.
Whether it is, I have no idea. But maybe you'll be able to see that. It didn't require too much. There was one main thing that seemed to be missing, but yeah. Uh, but yeah, I'm now going to yeah. Anyway, that was basically it, and I will piece together my bits and pieces from that. I'm trying to work within your existing framework as much as possible, but it took me a bit of time to figure out what was what and how to get it to work and adapting it a bit so I could test it locally and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and we've got the proposal template. So what we've done with the previous proposal has worked quite well. Is to open like a draft PR once you've got something that's
Yep.
fast looking at, then you get feedback and we can go from
Yep.
there.
Yep.
Um,
And it's that proposal 000, that one template? That's the
Yes,
template?
yes. So
Yeah.
this is the template we have.
Cool.
It's kind of a more lightweight version of the CAP process. So that's what
Yeah.
the kind of starting point was.
Yeah.
It's a bit lighter because we don't have as much complexity there.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're able to open a draft PR with that, and then let us know. If me or Antonio or Nick you can help with that as well.
Yeah.
But I think once that draft PR is there, we can give feedback and we can also do a call and sync on it as well.
Yep. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, that's good. That's it. All good. That was the main thing. Yeah. Just what next? But now that makes sense. I think it's simpler than maybe we sort of thought in some respects. But yeah, that's good. Cool.
Yes, yeah, right. Yes, so I think other than this, yeah, we didn't have a lot on the agenda for today. Do either of you have other topics for today?
No, just here to catch up, find out what you're doing. At some point, I've try and carve out some time to help, but it's tracking at this point.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. When you have some time and you'd like that, and then just let us know. I think as we're working through the proposals, we're creating more implementation issues, and we're trying to make these granular so we can get new contributors in and try and have the kind of tasks being well described. And we found this proposal process being quite helpful to go through this kind of upfront design.
Noted.
So. Yes, yeah. In that case, then yeah, I think we can probably call it earlier then if you've got nothing else, on the agenda for today. Yeah, I'll just stop the recording then.